In the name of God, the most merciful, praise be to God, Lord of the creation, and peace and prayers be upon Prophet Muhammad, his kin and companions. I would like to welcome you, brothers and sisters, to the 12th episode of our program, Living Example. In our last episode, we talked about the second Aqaba pledge, and after the second Aqaba pledge took place, the Muslims went back to Yathrib or to Medina, and the Muslims in Mecca started getting ready to migrate to Medina. They knew it was their destination and place of settlement, and the Prophet, peace be upon him, ordered whomever was capable to go there. The first to go to Medina was Abu Salama, and with him his wife Salama. If you remember, they had migrated to Abyssinia during the second migration. Also this time the first to migrate to Medina were a man and a woman, Abu Salama and Salama. The story of their migration is a tragic one, to be honest, and we like to stop and point out these tragedies, not to live them, but rather to learn from them in our present lives. I mean, if may God forbid you live through hardships or rough times, how would you act? You should take Salama as a role model. How Salama was patient, how steadfast she was. This made her people eventually submit to her wishes and give her what she wanted. Salama narrated the event saying, me and Abu Salama set out to migrate to Medina. Then some people went after them, Salama's clan. Salama was of the Bani Makhzum tribe. She said, Bani Makhzum came after us, and they said to Abu Salama, you want to migrate, why are you taking our daughter with you? Give us back our daughter. They took me from him by force. When Bani Makhzum took Salama from Abu Salama, he didn't stop. And he didn't say anything to show he would. He wasn't leaving her alone. She was with her family. Yet he didn't stop for her and kept going to Medina, thinking Allah Most High would protect her and would eventually provide a solution. When Bani Makhzum took Salama, she had her son Salama with her. So what happened? Her in-laws came. The clan of Bani Abd al-Asad, Abu Salama's clan. They said, this is our child. And they took the boy from Bani Makhzum. Bani Makhzum said, no, the boy is ours. Both of the clans kept pulling the boy until his arms were injured. May God be pleased with him. Salama, son of Salama. Her in-laws took the boy with them. The Bani Abd al-Asad took Salama. And her family, the Bani Makhzum, took her back home with them. Imagine a woman imprisoned by her family, taken from her husband, away from her son, barred from meeting the Prophet, peace be upon him, prevented from her faith, and they kept her imprisoned for a whole year. Salama stayed in Mecca for a whole year, away from her child and unable to see her husband, and she would go to Abtah every day, which was the vast area surrounding Mecca. She would sit there all day. All day she would cry and supplicate to Allah Most High. You could be thinking, why did that happen? Sometimes we don't have enough patience. Women of these days would say, what's the point? Wasn't she on the right path? Why did God punish her? This is all for you, to learn patience from Salama. Of course she would receive her high status for her patience and for her struggle, and you'd learn to be patient. If there's something you want and you didn't get, you should be patient. Allah may give it to you next year. This is all in Allah's will. She stayed like that for a year, and a year later, one of her cousins passed her by in Abtah, and he felt a little sympathy toward her. He went to her family and said, why are you holding that poor woman? Why do you prevent her from leaving? Why do you imprison her? Give her back her child and let her go back to her husband. What do you want from her? What's the use of all this? She stood firm for a whole year and she held on to her faith. And Abu Salama hadn't come to give himself up to free her. So they felt sorry for her and gave her back her boy and told her to be off on her way. Salama couldn't believe what happened. Right away, without waiting or asking anyone or waiting for a caravan, she rode her camel and went to Al-Madinah Al-Munawwara. A woman, alone, on a camel with her little child, set off on her journey without hesitation. The distance between Mecca and Medina is about 450 kilometers, the same distance from the south of Damascus to Aleppo. She traveled all that distance, not by car, not by a Mercedes, nor a bus. She was traveling on a camel. It would take at least 10 days, or maybe 8, depending on the distance. She went out without hesitation, and once she went out of Mecca, Allah sent her one of His soldiers. Not an angel, not a jinni, just a man who was even a polytheist. It was Uthman bin Talha. one of Mecca's chivalrous young men. And as we said, an Arab is always chivalrous, especially with women. He looked and said, "Where to, Salama?" She said, "I'm on my way to see my husband in Medina." He said, "Alone, all by yourself?" She said, "No, by God, I have no one but Allah." He said, "By God, I won't leave you." You shouldn't be alone. A woman traveling all by herself all day and all night while in the desert? Wasn't she afraid? Didn't she expect danger? It's because she had a great objective. She stood firmly. Salama said, "By God, I never saw a man of the Arabs more generous than Uthman bin Talha. He would bring the camel and let it sit on the ground for her to ride it, and he would stand aside, so he wouldn't look at her while she mounted. He would step away and turn his back, and after she mounted her camel, he would hold the camel and lead the way." She said he went on leading the way, traveling by day and resting by night. Naturally, there were rest stops on the way where one could find people always ready to assist travelers. So they rested, and when it was time for her to dismount, she said, "He would step away from me until I dismount, then he returns and ties the camel, then sleeps away from me." Notice his manners. Even though he was a polytheist, how great such an Arab was. I honestly can't believe what happened to Arabs. What happened to the Arab youth? Where's the Arab chivalry? Never mind Islam or faith. You're an Arab. Where's your chivalry towards women? These days, they would stand at girls' schools, so they would talk to them and play games on them. You're an Arab. You should preserve a girl's honor, not to act against a girl's honor. I ask Allah to lead us back to our religion and to our origins, the Arab origins. Salama reached her destination with the help of Uthman bin Talha to Medina, and precisely to Quba, on the outskirts of Medina. He said, "Your husband is here," and he let her be, then went back to Mecca. He had nothing to do with her, but glory be to God who later honored him with Islam. This was the migration of Salama, which happened a year later. But who left Mecca right after Abu Salama? It was Layla bint Abi Hathma, along with her husband, and they were among the first to migrate to Abyssinia. And she was the first woman to enter the city of Medina, Layla bint Abi Hathma, and became the woman of the two migrations. She migrated the first time to Abyssinia and migrated the second time to Medina. Now we go back to Quraysh. We said the 12th year had ended, and came the months of Muharram and Safar. During these 2 months, from the 13th year of prophethood, none of the Muslims remained in Mecca. They all migrated. But how did they migrate? They did without Quraysh knowing, since Quraysh would stop anyone from migrating. They would try anything, apart from Umar when he migrated, since no one dared to come against him or stop him. So no one was left in Mecca except for the Prophet, Abu Bakr, and Ali. Only these three stayed with their families. Quraysh was also convinced that Muhammad was going to migrate, and they knew he had gathered support in Medina. So they feared he would establish a state and compete with them, and surely his religion was going to spread, and he would destroy their religion and all their interests that we talked about. Quraysh gathered for a meeting to consider the situation. They wanted to plan their next step. They decided there was only one solution. They had always postponed it, but enough. They wanted to kill Muhammad. And that night, on that specific day, and it was the first day of the month, the first of Rabi' al-Awwal. Why? Because there's no moon. So it would be dark, no light. They sat and thought what they should do. The first idea was to tie him to a camel and leave it in the desert until he dies of hunger and thirst. That's the first idea. The second idea, they thought it's better to kill him, but they feared the one who would kill him would be an object of vengeance by Bani Abd Manaf or Bani Hashim. So they gathered 40 men, one from each tribe, and wanted them to kill him together in one blow. And they should do this in his house while he's asleep. They wanted it to be over before sunrise. They wanted Muhammad to be dead by sunrise. But he was protected by Allah. And he was planned for. Don't plan your own matters. Leave it for our sake. We are the best of planners, and we shall protect you. This is what one poet recited on this issue. Fear not, for we shall plan for you. Of course, we consider reasons and do what we can with our trust in Allah. This was a tremendous occurrence involving one of the heroes of Islam, whose name was Raqiqa bint Sayfi. That woman, Raqiqa, was the cousin of Abdullah, father of the Prophet, peace be upon him. His father's cousin. She had heard about the polytheist plot, heard what the chiefs had plotted, and immediately went to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and she told him about it. She said, the polytheists are plotting against you, and today they plan on going to your house to kill you. That's when the Prophet, peace be upon him, sent for Ali and commanded him to sleep in his bed. And the Prophet, peace be upon him, went out before midnight. In the hadith about his migration, describing the Prophet's migration, Aisha said in this hadith, and she's the one who narrated this hadith, in which she described how the Prophet, peace be upon him, came to Abu Bakr. This confirms what we said in our last episode, that Aisha had been mature and she had known what was going on. For if she was too young, she couldn't have narrated such a hadith. Aisha said the Prophet, peace be upon him, never missed coming to the house of Abu Bakr, either in the morning or in the evening. Imagine the description. Always the Prophet went there, either in the morning or in the evening. Why? Because he was his friend, his soulmate, the friend who supported him in truth, the friend who stood by him and supported him with all he had. That is why one should look for a friend, one who would help him carry out the commands of Allah Most High. Just like what Shafi'i said, what a world would this be without an honest friend who commits to his promise and is fair? So, Abu Bakr was the closest of friends to the Prophet, peace be upon him, and the Prophet visited him always. She said one time the Prophet came in the middle of the day, in the heat of noon. Abu Bakr was surprised. What brings you here at this time? The Prophet, peace be upon him, and I want to make this short, the Prophet, peace be upon him, said to Abu Bakr that Allah permitted him to migrate, and Abu Bakr was happy. She said he was extremely happy about this. He said, can I be your companion? He said, yes, you shall be my companion. Abu Bakr started crying, and Aisha said, by God, I never saw anyone before that day cry of happiness, and I didn't know a person could cry of happiness until I saw Abu Bakr. He cried of happiness since he was to accompany the Prophet in his migration. Abu Bakr had already prepared 2 camels. He expected this and had hoped to be the Prophet's companion, and he had prepared 2 camels and 2 animals to carry their belongings, and had given them to Asma bint Abi Bakr. Look, Asma, how much your name is honored in Islamic history. May Allah aid you to become like Asma, who's promised paradise, and I hope, God willing, all of you will be promised paradise. He prepared the camels and gave them to Asma to take care of them, and they agreed that at midnight the Prophet, peace be upon him, would come to his house from where they would set out together. The Prophet, peace be upon him, went back home and went to sleep so as not to draw any attention. He woke up before midnight and went out through a small opening. Some narrations suggest that no one saw him. Others suggest that Allah put them to sleep and that he had thrown dust over their heads and then went out without being seen. Ultimately, he reached the house of Abu Bakr. He knocked the door and both of them set out on foot. May peace, prayers and blessings be upon Allah's Messenger. They walked barefoot on the tips of their toes on Mecca's dirt and rocks, so that none of the polytheists would notice them leaving. If they were to wear shoes, then others would hear their footsteps. So they walked on the tip of their toes. By the time they were out of Mecca, at the outskirts, the Prophet's feet were shedding blood. May peace and prayers be upon him. Abu Bakr looked and felt sad for the Prophet on account of his feet shedding blood, so he carried him. The Prophet, peace be upon him, had planned for them to set out on a path opposite that which leads to Medina, because he suspected that Quraysh would follow him. So he set out south opposite Medina and headed to Mount Thawr. Abu Bakr carried the Prophet, peace be upon him, all the way up the mountain. I went up Mount Thawr, and it was a very hard journey. It wasn't the climb that was hard, no. The path is easier than that to the cave of Hira on Mount Nur, but it's very long. The way up takes 4 hours. 4 hours. Abu Bakr carried the Prophet, peace be upon him, until they reached the top of the mountain. By the way, the mountaintop is magnificent. From above you would see the whole of Mecca. You'd see everything in Mecca, and you would see the cave through which Allah protected the Prophet, peace be upon him. You'd notice the divine wisdom in how Allah inspired the Prophet to come to this specific spot. When the Prophet, peace be upon him, reached the cave, Abu Bakr stopped, and he put down the Prophet whom he was carrying, and he said, "By God, you shall not enter. I shall go in before you to check if it's safe." He wanted to go in first to see if there were insects or anything harmful. He was willing to sacrifice his life for the Prophet and went inside and noticed there were holes in the cave. There might be dangerous insects in them, such as scorpions, so he started tearing pieces from his clothes, the clothes he was wearing, and with them he would seal these holes. He kept on doing this until there was nothing left of his clothes, and there was one last hole inside the cave on the ground level. He said, "Come in, O Messenger of God." Abu Bakr, may God be pleased with him, sat and put his foot in the hole. He put his foot in the hole, may God be pleased with him. He sat and sealed the hole with his foot. Then the Prophet, peace be upon him, entered. Of course, they were tired, and they were pursued by the polytheists. Once the Prophet got in, he put his head on Abu Bakr's lap, and he fell asleep. He was assured, knowing that Allah would aid him, while Abu Bakr couldn't get any sleep. He was afraid, not for himself. He was afraid for the Prophet, peace be upon him. During that moment, a scorpion stung Abu Bakr in his foot, and he couldn't get his foot out because the Prophet, peace be upon him, was sleeping on his lap. Yet the pain was great and his tears fell. They fell on the Prophet's cheek, peace be upon him. And the Prophet woke up. "What is it, Abu Bakr? Are you afraid?" He said, "No, by God, it's just that I was stung by a scorpion." The Prophet said, "Don't worry." And he used his blessed saliva. He wiped Abu Bakr's foot. Call it a sterilizer or a disinfectant. You can't have something like it in any school of medicine. Such was the purity and healing ability of the Prophet, peace be upon him. Now, they spent 3 days in the cave. Many heroic incidents took place. One specific incident concerning Asma bint Abi Bakr, and I always like to mention it. Again, they spent 3 days in the cave. Before Abu Bakr went out, he called Asma and gave her some money, a few dirhams, and told her to buy some food for the Prophet, peace be upon him, and specifically meat, since the Prophet enjoyed meat. He told her to buy food and such, but specifically meat, since the Prophet, peace be upon him, enjoyed meat. May Allah be pleased with you, Abu Bakr. This was one event. Asma went out and bought the meat, and early in the morning, she started cooking and preparing the food. When the polytheists went to the Prophet's house and didn't find him, and found Ali instead, they knew that the Prophet, peace be upon him, had set out. And the first place they looked for him was Abu Bakr's house. They went there to search for him. Abu Jahl knocked on the door. Asma feared they might find something out. She wasn't afraid of him. It's because she was cooking and preparing the food, and thought he might smell the food and wonder why they're cooking at this time of day, and then suspect something was going on. And so he wouldn't ask her, and wouldn't doubt anything. She lit up the lantern. She lit up that which they used to light the house, and she carried it in front of her, then opened the door. At that time, the sun wasn't up yet. It was still a bit dark. She thought, it's better if he smelled the oil and the burning fire to cover the smell of the food. Notice how smart she was. May Allah be pleased with her. Then Abu Jahl came in. "Where's your father, woman?" She said, "By God, I don't know where he is." She said she didn't know. Then he hit her so hard on her face that her earring fell off. The earring fell to the ground, and he left her house angry. Then Abu Bakr's father came in. By that time, the whole of Quraysh had found out about the matter, and they all went to Abu Bakr's house. Abu Quhafa came in, and he was an old man. He was still a polytheist. He said, "By God, I can see that you are in a lot of trouble because of your father and his money. He went away and left you and didn't care about you. He even took all his money with him." She said, "No, by God, he didn't." This was another heroic act by Asma. "By God, he left us so much." But the truth is, he hadn't left anything. Since when Muhammad, peace be upon him, became a prophet, Asma said her father had 40,000 dirhams. And when they migrated, he had only 500 dirhams left. He spent it all, may God be pleased with him, for the sake of Islam and the Prophet. Asma said that her wits came to her. She went and brought some gravel, put them in a bag where Abu Bakr used to keep his money, and she put a thick cover over it and said, "Come over here." Abu Bakr's father was blind. "Come here and check for yourself." He put his hand and said, if this is why he left you, then he has done good. Good. He thought it was a lot of money, yet the truth is he didn't leave a single dirham. Then the polytheists announced to Quraysh a bounty, 100 camels to whom he who brings Muhammad's head. Dead or alive, it didn't matter to them. 100 camels was a great fortune. Imagine 100 camels. For example, in our days, they're like 100 luxury cars of the Mercedes brand. It was a lot of money. All the youth of Mecca spread out in search for the Prophet. What did they expect? That the Prophet, peace be upon him, had left for Medina. So they all went north to Medina, north of Mecca, heading to Medina. While the Prophet, peace be upon him, through God's inspiration and his intelligence, went south. During those times, if 3 days passed, no one can catch the one he's following. No matter how fast the rider was, he would lose them after 3 days. It would be over. That's why the Prophet, peace be upon him, stayed in the cave for 3 days. So that was another of Asma''s heroic acts. The third act of heroism by Asma was when she had to carry the food after cooking it and set out every day from daybreak in order to deliver the food to Abu Bakr and the Prophet, peace be upon him. At that time, may God be pleased with her, she was pregnant. She was pregnant in the 3rd or 4th month. Compare her to women of our time, the spoiled women of our time. She's pregnant, so she can't wake up for dawn prayers. Why? It's annoying. She fears for the baby. This is nothing compared to women of the past and how much they suffered for the sake of their religion, for the sake of knowledge. I told you it took me 4 hours to go up the mountain and reach the cave. We can say she was younger than me and was more athletic and was used to climbing mountains. Let's say 2 hours. Is it easy for a pregnant woman to climb up for 2 hours while carrying the food to the Prophet, peace be upon him? This is why I consider Asma to be one of the heroines of the migration. May Allah aid us all to be heroines like Asma through working on spreading the faith of Allah Most High. Lastly, I want to say that when the Prophet, peace be upon him, left the 2 camels, he agreed with a polytheist called Abdullah bin Urayqit. He told this man that after 3 days they would meet with him on the shoreline. This man was known for his experience with travels, just like a tour guide, and he was to take them to Medina. Despite he was a polytheist, the Prophet, peace be upon him, agreed with him to meet him 3 days later. I took a lot of time and maybe even forgot to pause, but in any case, if you have any questions or would like to say anything, go ahead. We have 2 minutes, God willing.
Professor, how come the Prophet, peace be upon him, sought the help of a polytheist?
You mean Abdullah?
Abdullah ibn Urayqit.
I will repeat. The Arabs had great characteristics. Abdullah bin Urayqit was a polytheist, and Quraysh announced 100 camels as a prize for he who knew the whereabouts of the Prophet. And despite that, Abdullah didn't say anything. It wasn't out of faith. It was out of his chivalry as an Arab, a loyal person. He promised the Prophet and he wouldn't betray him. An Arab would never betray and would never go back on his word. That's why I wish we could be the Arabs we were and add our faith to that. Then our morals would be great and we would excel over other nations. With that, I hope we had enough for today and we come to the end of our episode. Thank you, girls. Thank you for being with me and for being good listeners. Thank you very much. Brothers and sisters, many thanks to you. I would like to remind you that I'll be with you today on the forum from 11 till 1 after midnight Mecca al-Mukarramah time. I'll be waiting for you there on the forum. Till then, peace be upon you and Allah's mercy and blessings.